Welcome to Paranormal Living, previously known as Light Talk, where the paranormal is what we talk about. Well, we have a great guest for you tonight. I'm excited to get moving, so we're going to go ahead and get started again. And go ahead and welcome our guest and go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm John Milor. Uh, I consider myself a paranormal Christian. Uh, Christian first, paranormal after. And my story, it kind of like starts out as someone very interested in spiritual things, mysterious things, paranormal type stuff. And that's the path that I went on until I was 21 years old, and I had a vision, and then everything changed. I became a believer. Uh, but then I discovered after becoming a believer, there were lots of things that I couldn't just say that don't exist. And I wasn't necessarily in a place where I could just say, oh, well, that entire part of my life and everything that I learned from all of that is just demonic. Let's just put a big fat label on it and never go there anywhere at all again. Uh, I'm a little bit too much of an intellectual to do that. I would choose to rather go back again to all of the things that I experienced and learned, and then apply a new way of thinking to that and analytically dissect all these different phenomenon and things that I knew about, both from research and personal experiences, and then see these things in scripture where they line up. And like, okay, uh, big case in point, Eric von Däniken, he wrote Chariots of the Gods back in the 1970s, and he connected the dots saying angels and aliens are the same thing. I would have said, oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm on the same sheet of music with that. Um, but over the past decades, several decades, they've gone from just that basic premise, aliens and angels are the same thing, to aliens are God. Let's just remove God from the picture. Genesis 2:7, God created Adam and Eve out of the dust of the earth. Well, we don't think so. We think that we were genetically engineered by aliens. And so now we kind of have this whole almost like UFO alien religion where they are our gods. They're promoted to the status of being our genetic creators. And God is like taking a back seat. Well, maybe he's just, I don't know, he's just, I don't know. But humans are from aliens, you know. So that's what's happened with that. And I didn't really give much thought of it back then when I was younger until I had my vision with Jesus at an older age, at 21 years old. And that's when I set out on this path to reconcile my faith, my new faith, with all these things that I already believed in and understood a lot of things about, but didn't understand how would they line up with Christianity. Were they incompatible completely? Or were there some areas where, hey, these things, maybe it's talking about the same thing here, and in showing you different aspects of it, maybe the Bible actually can just illuminate and give more information than I had before, things that people never considered. So that's how I became a paranormal Christian, right? And that is the name of one of my books, A Paranormal Christian. But then this later book, Christian Ufology, which published in 2021, is like the third edition. Well, it's the second edition, but the third of a series of books that I wrote about reconciling my faith with these other paranormal type ideas, concepts, and whatever. Let me go back to where this all started. As a young kid, when I was 5 years old, um, I was staying with my great grandparents, me and my brother. Um, and they were very Pentecostal, you know, into the supernatural and just signs and wonders and stuff like that. And my great grandfather was a minister, evangelist during the Great Depression. They spent years on the road, going from town to town, doing the big tent revivals. Um, and my great grandmother and my great grandfather, they were all about Jesus. I mean, you go into their house, the radio's playing, it's gospel music. If the TV's on, it's an evangelist. Ain't no point in the TV being on if it ain't something like that. She had a piano, she played all gospel songs. Um, they were in ministry, intercessors group and stuff, and just very plugged in to the local church there and where they lived in Madera, California. Uh, but at 5 years old, I remember um, we were there at Grandma's house, and it was a bunch of people there. So it was like Thanksgiving or something. It was a big family gathering. I remember a lot of people there, and Grandma's reading a newspaper, and suddenly she says, "Hey, I got an announcement to make to the family." And everybody's kind of looking around like, "What? Okay, okay. Grandma's got something to say." And so we all come in, and she starts reading this article in the newspaper about a UFO chase. The police are chasing a UFO around the countryside of Madera. And then it shot off up into the sky. And it's got everybody in the community mystified. This was 1975. I remember this night specifically. And I was only 5 years old. And I remember the look on everybody's faces, and they were like, why is Grandma, of all people, reading that? It was a big, big deer in the headlights look on everybody. And that's what struck me as so memorable as, it was an E.F. Hutton moment. Everybody's like, what? And Grandma sets a newspaper down and she says, when I was a little girl, I saw a UFO. And she started to proceed to tell a story about seeing this cigar-shaped UFO, aluminum color. Her and her sister both saw it hovering across the plains of Kentucky. This was 100 years ago. She said it had this transparent dome on top, and they even saw the occupant. So, flew by, alien like looking at him. Hey, what's going on? It's like maybe 30 feet off the ground, just like right in front of them, you know. Um, and they just jaws dropped, didn't know what they were looking at, had no frame of reference because they had a wagon. They had never even seen a car. This is out in the sticks in Kentucky, in the middle of nowhere. Um, they ran back. They told their mother. She told them, never ever tell that story to anybody ever again. And they were like, oh, okay, sorry, didn't mean to do anything wrong, But
Right.
she made them like hush up. You not hearing that, not in this house. And so they clammed up. Years later, Grandma's sister died. So Grandma had this story to herself for many years. And it must have just kind of, stuck in the back of her head, but, you know, kind of forgot about it until she read that newspaper article. And then it all came flooding back, and she thought, I got to get this off my chest. Over 60 years of keeping this to myself is enough. So she told the story, and then when she finished it, she said, I don't care what people think. Those things are real. Now, Grandma, being that she read the Bible 27 times, literally, she told me once, uh, never really took it to heart that, wait a second, what is it about the Bible and this that, are incompatible? She didn't feel any need to reconcile anything. In her mind, it was just very simple. God's creation is big. Easy as that, It's obviously more than what you know. She didn't make the suggestion that they were angels or anything like that. Nothing like that. It was just, hey, I saw this thing, you know, simple as that. But Jesus is real. And of course, she also had encounters with Jesus. When she was in her 60s, I believe, she had a stroke. It almost killed her. They didn't know if she was going to be able to walk or talk again. The left side of her body was completely paralyzed and she couldn't talk. And while in the hospital, she said Jesus walked in to her hospital room and looked over at her and smiled. And then, boom, paralysis gone. And then he turned around and walked out. And she sat up in her bed and was ready to yank out the IV. As soon as the doctor came in, she's like, I'm ready to go home now. Jesus came in and he healed me. So that's what she said. And everybody knew the stories about Jesus. And he visited her again later in life in some fantastical vision. She was outside in the rose garden, doing things, watering or whatever, about to go in for the evening. And she went to the house, to the back door, and she felt a urge to turn around. She turned around and she saw that there was an overcast sky and the clouds parted. This circle, right? Jesus comes down, lands in
Wow.
her backyard, and says, I'm not coming for you now. But the next time I come, I want you to come with me. And sends back up and clouds close back up, right? Too much,
Wow.
you know? But these were the stories you could expect from Grandma. She also was saved by an angel that was wearing a military uniform and a pickle hob helmet. Another interesting story she had. So she didn't dismiss these things. She just simply told the account as it happens to her. And then many years later, when I was in the army, um, my dad went to visit them. So Grandma woke up one morning and saw Grandpa Rant, her deceased husband, standing at the foot of her bed, and he was young again. And he was
Mm.
surrounded in light, and she could see glory behind him, and he was holding his hands out to her like this. And then he slowly faded. So that morning she went in and they're eating breakfast at the table, and she tells her daughter, my grandma Ruth, she says, I saw Rant in spirit this morning. I ain't got much longer here. I think I could have left this morning, but it's coming soon, obviously. And next day she died. And it was a massive heart attack. She died in seconds. They said while she was walking from the kitchen to the living room, her heart just, the whole side of her heart blew out. She just fell on the ground and left instantly.
Wow.
Um, so that was my great grandma. And so at 5 years old, I hear this testimony from her, and I heard her Jesus story, and I'm hearing all the Bible stories when I was growing up. And, we would hear her reading about David and Goliath and uh, Daniel in the lion's den and stuff. And so we had those early seeds of faith. But then I heard this UFO story, and that really, I glommed onto that because just seeing everybody's reactions, there's got to be something there. And I was
Yeah.
all questions. On the way home, I'm asking my mom, what's a UFO? What's a UFO? And she's like, oh, well, Star Trek, because we were avid Trekkies. We watched Star Trek religiously. And she's like, well, it probably is like that. I bet you there's a lot of things out there, and it's just like that. And grandma just
Mhm.
saw something like that. And so it made sense. And she's like, oh, look at the stars. Look how many of them, you're telling me this is the only life, the only planet. Come on. So it was a common sense no-brainer at a young age. And
Mhm.
Jesus is real, God's real, heaven, the Bible's real, ETs are real. What's the problem? You know? Um, then as time went on, I was so immersed with things of a spiritual, supernatural nature to them. Um, my family, it was just kind of like that. My mom was open. Um, She has a strange way with animals. She can communicate with them, or she could when she was still with us. She passed earlier this year, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got a million stories about her and animals that is just baffling. She knew how to communicate with animals. They had an understanding, and I inherited some of that. Not to her level, but I do have some of that. And my sister too. But my sister, she's got other types of experiences too. Like when she was a kid, she used to say, that there was this house, abandoned house down the street, and she said, "Oh, that's haunted," and the Roger lives there, the name of the ghost. And she said, "When I die, I want to be a ghost." And she'd always talk about ghosts and stuff. And she is 6 years older than me, so I was the little runt, and she was usually terrifying me with these stories that she had. And my brother would have to come in and calm me down. He was 3 years older than me, so um, but my sister had all these paranormal type experiences too. So that just kind of fueled my interest in the paranormal. And
Oh yeah.
my mom bought the Time Life series, um, what do you call it, subscription, and they would send these books every month, part of this book club thing. And it was Mysteries of the Unknown, Time Life, whatever. And they had all kinds of paranormal things in them, retro recognition, past life regressions, ghosts, Bigfoot, all the all manner of cryptids, paranormal phenomenon, instances of time travel or dimensional travel, thought forms, different types of entities, and just all kinds of paranormal stuff. And so before I was even a teenager, I could talk about all of these things because for some reason, this information was so interesting. I would read these books from cover to cover and memorize everything. And I got into experimenting. I tried channeling. Not a good idea. Uh, I probably opened something up in my house because then that house later became incredibly infested with poltergeist phenomenon and stuff. I think I might be a poltergeist conduit because even now, weird things happen around the house where I'm at. I used to spend a lot of time in an office in the other room typing on the keyboard when I was in school. And after about 7 or 8 years, we would hear type the keyboard. We'd be downstairs watching TV and we hear the keyboard. And there's other times when I'd go to bed or I'm sleeping and I go to the bathroom and then I come back to the bed and my wife was like, "You were here in the bed with me." So I went to the bathroom, but a part of me stayed or something.
Oh
So
wow.
I still kind of have these weird issues of things happening around me like that. But that intensified. And then I went and joined the army fresh out of high school. While I was still in high school, I signed up. So 17 years old. Yeah, Army infantry. Yeah, yeah. I was all hardcore. And we got deployed to the Panamanian conflict. And while I was there in Panama, uh, we were stationed at Fort Sherman, which is right near the Caribbean Sea. Or, and was a place called Green Hell out in the jungle too. That was an obstacle course that was really intense, and it had a rope, this net rope um, that draped over a cliff that was about 100 feet high, and you had to climb it. No safety, anything. You
Oh
just
my.
climb down that thing, and that was part of the obstacle course. So I loved it. I absolutely loved obstacle courses. And anyway, the back of the base was just straight up jungle, so they didn't even put a fence around the base because the jungle was filled with deadly predators. Plants were horrible. You brush up against something, you start burning because it would have some kind of liquid or something on the plant, the leaves, that they would be spikes or thorns or a poisonous something. And the plants were painful. The bugs were ridiculous. Spiders that were bigger than my hand that weren't tarantulas. Um, it happened to be hatching season for the ants. So they had these really big red ants that were flying around. And parts of the jungle we tried land navigation. We didn't get far. Parts of the jungle that the ground was 2 inches thick of ants that were just, the ground was moving
Ugh.
with a carpet of ants. Um, and we had to sleep out there because they wanted us to make sure the perimeter was secure. And we're like, you don't need a fence with that. Ain't anybody going through that. Panamanian Defense Forces coming through the Caribbean Sea, they thought, and they could climb up and then go through all this jungle madness and try to get to the base through the back end. And we're like, fat chance, you ain't getting through that. But who knows? Maybe the natives they got a few tricks up their sleeves to get through that. There was a type of snake I remember now. It's called a bushmaster. So a very territorial snake, and it chased a couple of guys and almost got them. Deadly poisonous. They had pit vipers there too. So if you're running too fast and you fall into a pit, you could get swarmed by deadly snakes inside of a pit. And so all kinds of things like that out there.
Nope.
We had to stay out there that in the night. Um, I was on guard duty and I was with my team leader who really loved to ridicule me to no extent or to no end about how strange I was because I was curious about things like ghosts and UFOs and stuff. And on one occasion, early on, my first week joining that unit, I made a mistake of asking him if he'd ever seen a ghost. And everybody that was there, we were on a land navigation course at Fort Ord, and we finished way early. And it was too early for us to go back in. So we had to go kill some time and go sit under a tree. And so I'm like sitting in this nice nature setting. It's kind of like camping, just no campfire. And what do you do when you're on a camping trip and you have time to kill? Well, you tell stories. Um, for me, camping, ghost stories, natural fit. But in the Army, you're only allowed to talk about football, beer, women, and maybe fixing cars. That's about it. If you go into any kind of intellectual territory, then you're an oddball and you don't fit. So I might have fit in some ways, loving obstacle courses and all of the nature of everything, being out in the woods and stuff. But I did not fit intellectually with any of these guys hardly, and they started laughing no end about me asking the corporal if he'd ever seen a ghost, and so they used to make fun of me a lot. And now here I was in the jungle with that corporal who was the leader of the pack of the ridiculers. And I saw this flashing light out in the jungle. And at first I dismissed it. I filtered it out. I thought it was sheet lightning in the sky, which was something that was common out there. But this was under the canopy of the jungle. And it was approaching our position because it was getting brighter and brighter. And it flashed intermittently about every 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And I sat there watching it all the way until it got all the way up on our position. It was only about 30 feet from me and maybe 30 feet up in the trees. And it stayed there. Once it reached the position, it didn't keep advancing like it was observing us. And I also had this intense feeling of being watched. And it was kind of unnerving. Like, what is that? And of
Right.
course, I go through the Rolodex. This is not ball lightning. Ball lightning, once it manifests, it zips around erratically and it hits something and it grounds out. Here we got all these trees. It's not touching any of them. I had an M60, big chunk of metal. I had a radio with a bunch of lithium batteries and a 6-foot whip antenna that was nothing short of a lightning rod. But that ball of energy was just sitting up there in the same spot. It was the end of my shift, so I figured, well, shoes on the other foot. I'm going to get to go wake up the guy who constantly taunts me about things like this not existing and point it to him and ask him what he thinks of it. This is going to be fun. And so I go and wake him up and I said, okay, it's time for your shift. By the way, there's this otherworldly ball of light over here flashing on and off. It's either an alien probe or some transdimensional swamp creature. Good night. And of course, he's all cussing me out until the thing flashes. And he catches it out of the corner of his eye. He turns and he looks, and I said, "Yeah, pretty bright, huh? You noticed that?" Uh, and he's like, "What the hell was that?" And I said, "That's what I've been telling you about. It is not swamp gas. It is not ball lightning. This is not supposed to exist." I had AMPVS 7 night vision goggles on, and I said, "Look, take a look." I flipped them on. I'm looking. When it's not flashing, it's not there. You can't hear it, can't see it. It's not there. And he's looking around and he's freaking out and gives me the goggles back. And I'm all just yammering on about this thing, right? And I said,
Right.
I got to communicate with it. And then he gets mad, and he's like, "You're freaking crazy, blah blah blah." And I take my weapon off. I'm like, I can't say I come in peace when I'm wearing an M60. Uh, and he's telling me not to disarm, and I'm like, "What are you gonna do? Shoot a ball of light? You think that's actually gonna do something? It's invisible, you know. The bullet probably just go right through it." And he's he kind of just shut down at that point.
Hmm.
He did mention a couple of theories. Maybe it's a laser from the aircraft carrier. They're shooting a laser over here, and I said, "No, lasers require line of sight. This is down in the trees. It's an independently roving object, and it's not entirely here." And so I do what I said, take my M60 off, go over. I introduced myself to whatever this is, and kind of read from the script of First Contact and Star Trek, Public Peace. It may not look like it, but hey, this is a time of war, but we're not here to fight you, who or whatever you are. I'm very curious about you. We expect if you live here, don't mean to intrude or trespass or anything on your territory. We mean you no harm, and uh, we'll try not to make a mess or damage anything. But
Right.
whatever you are, I'm curious to know more. I want to see you. Can you reveal more of yourself to me? And I felt this intense energy emanating toward me of this presence. And it was like the feeling of being watched times a million. And
Wow.
it was kind of like, I am here. This is me. And it was so strong that when it started moving toward me, I felt it moving toward me. And it kind of freaked me out because the intensity of it was very powerful. And I took a couple of steps backward because I was like, what'd I do? Is this thing gonna zap me or what? And I felt it lower itself and come close, and it went right over my head. And I felt it just like, I don't know, you might even be able to see my hairs kind of staticky or something.
Oh,
But I
wow.
felt it. I felt it. And I remember picking up the goggles and telling the corporal, I don't know how I feel it, but I can feel it moving. I know where it's at. And I'm just jabbering, right? And I do a complete 180. I turn around and I say, the next time it's going to flash there. And when I said the word there, it flashed on cue exactly where I pointed.
Wow.
And I was astonished because I was like, did you see that? Did you see that? I communicated with this otherworldly ball of light, this transdimensional entity. It communicated to me. It sent me its GPS coordinates and it somehow put it in my head. I could feel it moving. I'm just going on and on, right?
Right.
Uh, he shut down. He's just like, and whatever, I can't believe that you just not a little bit more excited that something that is not in any biology textbooks is here and it's intelligent. This thing understood me. It flashed on cue when I said the word there. I just kept going on and on. And it proceeded to flash on and off. It did a complete perimeter sweep of our location. Like if you're going to take a picture of something from every angle going all the way around. We had two
Wow.
more positions in that jungle further down. and it proceeded to flash on and off, going toward those directions. And then that was it. It didn't do anything like ultra fantastic, like assume a human form or some other creature or something. It was a ball of light about the size of a soccer ball, had the appearance of pure electricity. If and it was extremely bright. If you could take one of those flashes, those old school flashes that they used to put on the cameras, and
Right. Yeah.
increase it to the size of a soccer ball, that's how big it was because you were kind of blinded when it flashed and you were looking at it. You
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
see. It messed up your night vision kind of. It was extremely bright. And the next day, as we're getting ready to go back into garrison, that was our last night there in the jungle. Uh, I'm waiting for somebody to say something, and I keep looking at the corporal. I'm like, dude, you know what we saw, right? And he's not responding. And then I finally press him. I'm like, are you going to say anything about what happened last night? And I kind of got everybody's attention, and nobody's saying anything. And I said, we saw this glowing ball of light. It was flying around here, flashing on and off. I talked to it. It it telepathically communicated to me somehow. It wasn't English, but it let me know where it was. I could feel it moving, and it was invisible, and it was awesome. Did you see it? I saw it going toward your area, and I pointed at the other guys, right? And I said, Romero, it was going straight in your guys' direction. I know it had to do the same thing. Did you see anything? I kept having to press him and press him and press him. And the most I got at him was like, oh, I think I might have saw something. That was about
Jeez.
it. I'm like, come on, details, dude. What?
Slay, come on.
What? And the other guy said, oh, I think I might have saw a firefly. I'm like, a firefly the size of a soccer ball. I think that would be more unusual than what I saw.
It was a
Uh,
big fly. Big
so
fly.
I couldn't get that out of them. And then my team leader said, "Oh, I know what it was." And I'm like, "Oh, finally, I mean, you were there, all shut down." And he said, "You summoned it." And then they started laughing and making jokes and then building on each other's jokes in this little roast session about me being a wizard. And I had a cauldron out there somewhere and I was casting spells. And there's probably some scrolls in my backpack. And where's those black candles, and this and that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How can you just casually dismiss this, And I mean, I was honestly expecting, like, it is time of war. Maybe we should report this. Pretty unusual, but nobody wanted their name attached to that. And nobody was willing to say anything. And of course, I'm not going to go over my corporal's head. I was already ridiculed enough as it was. But in terms of my own personal experience, that really fired me up. As much as I was interested in the paranormal before that, I became 10 times more after.
Oh, I'm sure.
So after I got out of the army, I was all into ghost hunting and tarot cards and crystal gazing and um, palm reading. I know a little bit still, but not that I give any stock in it. Casting runes, um, channeling, not a good experience. Astral projection, had multiple experiences, mostly bad. Uh, Regarding astral projection, I just wanted to explore. I didn't want to communicate to anything out there because that might be divination. That's not, let's not go there. I'm not going to seek anything out. I just want to be left alone. Who wouldn't want to be invisible just to run around and see what you could see, right?
Right.
Uh, every time I got to the point where I was partially out of my body, things would show up immediately. Like they wouldn't leave me alone. One time I got out of my body, my feet were still stuck. Top part of my body came out, and I was like this in my bed, floating.
Uh-huh.
It felt ecstatic. All the energy and the vibrations. It's just like, wow, this is cool. Come on, feet, let's go, let's go. And then suddenly there's six beings around me, and they're grabbing on me and trying to pull me out. And like it did not feel good. It was not pleasant. And I'm like, oh, let me go, let me go. I finally popped back into my body because I was paralyzed when that happened. And you go through these different stages of it, and I hung it up at that point, and then I messed around with it again later on. Different things happened, but usually something bad would happen, and then I'd be like, okay, all right, I'm done. I'm done.
So what kind of beings
So
did you see?
those beings were a humanoid shape. That's all I could make out. And it was more like I saw them in my mind, but I felt them grabbing on me and trying to pull me out. And
Okay.
I was under the impression that if they'd have succeeded, that um, I might not have made it back to my body. They might have killed me. It did not feel pleasant. It felt like something hostile trying to take me out. Um,
Oh
Not
wow.
good. Not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Anyways, I was getting further and further into this stuff. And a friend of mine, I did ghost hunting with him, and um, I did ghost hunting on a camping trip. I mean, this was a place we went to, and I had a feeling that Indians had always been there. That there was a certain place that we camped that we're like, the Indians had to love this. I bet this is the place they had to powwow. And I could actually picture it in my mind. I could
Wow.
sit quietly and just think and like see into the past and see these couples getting together. This was the place where they did the hookups, right? Hey, we want some of your blood over here and some of ours with you. This is the mixture, right? Um, and in that place, there was this one beautiful waterfall, like 70 something feet high. And every picture I took in that area was black. So the pictures that I took all over the place during that camping trip, they all came out fine. But all the ones around this waterfall that I wanted the most, that I felt was like the most sacred place, those
Mm-hmm.
would not develop. So I thought, somebody didn't want these to come out, you know? So I had things like that happen all the time, right? And I messed with Ouija boards and stuff and things in the house. And but then one night I had this dream, and it was a really unusual dream. Uh, the gist of it is Jesus came to me in a dream. And so this was not like a Christmas story with Ebenezer Scrooge, right? This guy, he's a total jackass, right? He's mean, he's extremely greedy, most selfish person on planet Earth. He has a series of three dreams. He wakes up the next morning, he sees, oh wow, I got a second chance on life, I'm a better person. He's born again, right? Without saying that phrase, without saying, okay, he met Jesus, the depiction that they show in the movie is what happens to somebody when they're born again. They do feel like they're another person, like their true self finally come out to what they were intended to be when they were first created, like a little kid again. Everything is new, and you have new eyes, a new perception, everything. And I was an open book at that point. I I went to bed and I had this dream, and there was a presence with me in the dream. He was invisible. And at one point, I could even see things that he was moving and manipulating. And it was a friend with me in this dream. His name was Ramey. He's a buddy of mine in high school. And I look over at the friend and I said, he's invisible. This guy's invisible, the one that's with us. And we're like just puzzled, like, why is he invisible? This is strange. I woke up from that dream, and in the dream, I'm being shown all these different things in my life, like that mirror with an emotional resonance everything I'm seeing. Like part of it was a drug compound and all these dudes standing around with guns and stuff. And I'm like, man, this just makes me feel awful. And I was doing drugs at that time, and the people I had to go through to get what I wanted, I went to some really unpleasant places. I even saw a guy who was straight up possessed once. And oh gosh, horrible.
What
He,
was that like?
uh, yeah, he was, when we showed up, the place was garbage everywhere, right? And his wife opened the door of this little shack. She's like, I don't know what's wrong with Joe. I don't know what's wrong with Joe. She leads us in there, and I just wanted to get the drugs to get out of there, right, with my friend. And but no, we go over there and we see this guy standing and looking at himself in the mirror, and he has his pants dropped down around his ankles, and he crapped all over himself, and he's ripping the hair out of his chest, saying, "Get out of me! Get out of me! Get out of me!" And we're like, I wasn't on fire for Jesus Christian at that time. I would have said I was a Christian if you'd asked me, but I didn't know what the Trinity was. I didn't go to church. Clueless, right? But I knew
Right.
what that was. He was possessed, he was possessed and he wanted it out. He was going about it the wrong way though. He needed to go to a church and get some deliverance ministry. If he would have went and got baptized, boom, that would have come out. But that freaked us out, and then I saw
Of
that guy a
course.
little while later, a couple of days later, and he was normal again, didn't have any recollection of that. But
Mm.
I was like, yeah, dude, that's kind of humiliating, if anything. Wasn't in a
Yeah, but
rather
if you
glorious
don't
position
know,
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
If you don't know and don't remember, you probably won't think twice about it, really.
right, right. Yeah, we were there until the EMTs came and took him away. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the kind of darkness that I was in, and there were images in the dream that were like that, showing me like, okay, here's where you're at. And then I just got the overall message that keep going, just keep going the way you're doing. And guess what? You got two options, dead or prison. Uh, and that wasn't verbalized to me, but that was a message. You know how you just know things in a
You
dream,
just know.
right?
Yeah.
And I woke up from the dream and I'm just going from A to Z, linear format. Oh yeah, the dream started out this, it was this drug compound, and then it was this, and there was this, and there was this. And finally got to the end part of the dream where there was that invisible person, and me and my friend just kind of tripping like, who's that?
Yeah.
So sitting in the bed, I asked this rhetorical, I'm just talking to myself, and I said, who was that invisible person? And I heard the name Jesus spoke audibly in my ear, like right here, like, yeah. And I'm alone in my bedroom. I'm not expecting that, but it was so Jesus. It wasn't yelling it, but it was just incredibly forceful. I have
Yeah.
a feeling like when all those soldiers and stuff came to get Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am." Are you Jesus? And he said, "I am." And they all just fell down. I think
Yeah.
that's what they felt, you know, because he said, "I am," with the same force as the burning bush to Moses. I am. And they're
Yeah.
just Jesus. And I had heard the name Jesus a million times. I was like, if you'd have asked me, I'd have said, well, Jesus is the Son of God. I didn't know. Uh, First uh, Colossians tells you, all this stuff about Jesus's identity, that he was the one who created everything. It was through him that all creation came into being. He and his Father are one. So there's
Mhm.
this relationship there that I didn't understand. And there's so much more, the Trinity. I wrote this really awesome article on the Trinity, and I think I think personally, I think the Father is outside time space. I think Jesus is in time space experiencing the moment. And that's why he asks questions and he actually learns. He is the
Oh,
aspect
wow.
of God that learns from about himself from his own creation. My personal belief is that He wanted to know more about himself before he created anything. He's like, what would it be like if I created a bunch of free wills and then let them do whatever, and then learn from them and then decide how I want to be based on that? I mean, God values wisdom, right? And so I know that that flies in the face of a lot of things, right? Because God is omniscient. Well, maybe he didn't know everything about himself before he created everything, and he created existence in order to learn. It's a learning environment. Think about it. That's what linear time is. You have past, present, and future. Now he can bounce around. So part of him is outside of time space. And I believe when he created everything, he learned everything all at once because he's the Alpha and Omega. He could see
Right.
the end from the beginning. So he learned. So he knows. So he's omniscient. He created a creation and then boom, oh, everything that could be learned about it, the instant he created it, I know. But part of him is in creation. Part of him is embedded in creation, and that's Jesus manifest in his creation, going through it and experiencing it. And that's why there's so many scriptures where God is talking about his perception and as if he's learning it and going through the process, and yet part of him is outside of it and beyond. And Jesus is in communion with his Father, so he has access to all knowledge. And but at the same time, he allows himself to just kind of go through, right? So maybe Jesus is the one who experiences, and the Father is the one who experienced through the Son all at once, through all time, for eternity. That's it's kind of a weird thing to try to explain the Trinity, but there's other things, Trinity. Look at space, height, width, and depth creates three-dimensional space. That's the Trinity. You can't have any one without the other. Time, past, present, future, all one, and yet individual, distinct ways that you can look at it, right?
Right.
So there were things about God that I just didn't contemplate before. I didn't understand who Jesus was, but when he said his name, there was a new dimension, a new level of understanding that I got from him. Most of all, like was love, just boom, this
Yeah.
unhinged love that was just overwhelming. So
Isn't
after
it?
this experience, I just purged my bedroom. I'm ripping posters off the wall and getting rid of all these hideous things that I had. Um, my friends thought I was nuts because the dramatic change in me was just like that movie, A Christmas Story, how everybody was just tripping out. But of course, his deal was that he was greedy and angry and everything. I wasn't necessarily a mean person, but I was definitely a party hound. And after that experience, I couldn't look at a drug without getting nauseous. I had zero addiction, absolutely nothing. And I remember when it was put it was put to me as soon as I came out of that dream and had that experience, and I was crying and everything. And I'm like, okay, God, what do you want me to do for you? First time I ever asked that in my life. Everything was all, if I ever prayed, it was always, God, do this, God, please help me, God, this, God, that. But for the first time, I actually really wanted to do something for him. You know, what is expected of me? What do I do? Where do I find you? I got to get back to you.
Right.
And I immediately looked at the refrigerator that was stocked with beer. I probably drank more than I ate. And I was like, I felt like, I'm not telling you you have to get rid of it, but you know how you are. You're an addictive personality. You close the door on this drugs, that's open. You leave that cracked open, guess what's going to happen? You'll probably just channel all of that addictive energy into that. Without saying all of that, I just looked at the refrigerator and that was just immediately like, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm going to just get rid of that too while I'm at it. Why not? I feel
Nice.
higher than that right now. I feel so good, light as a feather, and I'm not drunk at all. And in fact, I had so much clarity that a drug couldn't have
Beautiful.
given it to me, and I got addicted to the clarity, to the clarity of consciousness. And it's funny because there's certain things you can do really well that require a lot of intense focus, playing sports, hitting that shot, playing a musical instrument, and you have to really, they call it getting in the zone. You can't really do that very well when you're inebriated or high on something. Some drugs might be able to sort of mimic it short term, but then it trashes your brain, and then you get to where you can't do it normally anymore, right? But I was in the zone as my default, and it was so pure that I didn't want anything to disrupt that, right? So I just
Right.
poured out all that alcohol, and I quit that too while I was at it. So a lifetime up into that point of all this addictive behavior just gone in the blink of an eye, and none of my friends could believe it because that was like probably one of the number one aspects of my personality hanging out with me. I always wanted to be high, and yeah, that was gone, just gone.
So what's
And
the
the first,
difference? Oh, sorry. What's the difference? Because you hear people doing psychedelics and stuff like that to get a better spiritual connection.
yeah.
With you having both sides like that, what are your thinkings on that? I mean, did you have a more
Well,
um
I opened myself up with that stuff too. I had seen spirits. Um, my experience was I like textures like a wall, right?
mhm.
Would instantly form up with objects and places, and I would see like these people trying to push through, and it was almost like a cellophane barrier and trying to push through all these things, people and creatures. And I remember looking at a wall at one point and thinking, wow, yeah, I could see how somebody could just totally freak out, panic, thinking these things that are all around and every textured surface around me and the ground and the ceiling and the walls. You go outside, you see the bushes moving, and there was a lady in the bush in front of the building, and the wind would blow and she would go like this,
Oh
and
my.
I'm like, it's trying to creep me out. And I'm like, it's the drug, except I know that there's also something there, but it can't get me. It really had to focus on just staying calm and not panicking. Uh, that was with those experiences. But
Wow.
with the God experience, uh, it's the real deal. So that's the counterfeit, right? The
Right.
God version is you feel the Holy Spirit, which I haven't felt a really strong, super powerful dose of the Holy Spirit in quite a while. I feel like I'm kind of in a desert now, and the Christian life is like that sometimes. But I've had times where I felt the Holy Spirit just overpower me and speak through me. And I've prayed over people, and I've done exorcisms before and felt the power of the Holy Spirit go through me, which dwarfs any LSD experience. I mean, when you feel the Holy Spirit just and power comes out of you and can expel a demonic being, I mean, that is an incredible, incredible experience. Um, so this was the life that I was looking at, and I had just been there in glory in the presence of the King of all creation. And he gifted me with this, and then he asked me, what else do you want out of your life? And so I was just purging things left and right, and then asking him, what do you want me to do? And it's like, well, you probably got a Bible collecting dust around here somewhere. You might want to read that. And and I made a list too. Like, okay, I gotta go get baptized. Gotta go to a church. Find a church somewhere. Gotta go to church. Gotta go get baptized. Pray. And I'm just like writing all these notes down and stuff. And I grab a Bible and I start reading it right away. Right away. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Ooh, that's right. And I'm going and I'm going. And then I'm starting to see things like, Genesis 2:7, God created Adam and Eve from the dust of the earth. And I always had all these mixed ideas about that. Is it like Clan of the Cave Bear, the Neanderthal, they meet the Cro-Magnon? And Christians never really could answer a lot of my questions, like how do they explain where did Neanderthal fit into the picture? Dinosaurs, aliens, I had all these questions and I couldn't get good answers out of Christians that I knew, right?
Right,
But
right.
I'm like, well, you know what? I'm willing to set all that aside. I just want to read this and find out. Well, suddenly I'm reading Genesis chapter 6, and then the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took them wives, any they chose. So were they wives? Sounds like they just took them, probably raped them, owned them, most likely.
Hmm.
They were not good, those beings. The
No.
ones that took the women in Genesis 6, and it said they left their first estate later in Jude. So these are angels. I'm seeing angels, the sons of God. I'm like, why do they call it sons of God? Well, where else is that used? And I'm like flipping around. Oh, Job 38, the sons of God appeared with Satan. Oh, wait, that those are angels. Satan's a fallen angel, so these sons of God must be fallen. And what they're doing over here, those are the giants. And then I'm like, well, yeah, I remember. I never asked Grandma, where did that Goliath guy come from? This 9 foot freak with 6 fingers and 6 toes. He was a genetic hybrid. And I know what this is. This is alien abductions. These
Oh my goodness.
angels are, and my synapses are going on fire. And of course, I remembered Eric von Daniken, and he wrote Chariots of the Gods, and he talked all this stuff about aliens equals angels. And I was like, yes, I always believed that. It made sense. It's making sense now. But I don't remember von Daniken talking about these Nephilim, and I'm seeing something new that I didn't know if anybody had ever seen it before. So I immediately start writing notes in my margin, and the more I read, the more paranormal stuff I'm seeing. And of course, my Rolodex is exploding in my head, right? I'm reading the Bible, and I'm like, this Bible is the most paranormal book I've ever read in my life. I've read every other book under the sun about paranormal phenomenon, but I never read this one looking specifically for paranormal phenomenon to find out if there's a real true way to interpret what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What's good and
Right.
what's bad, Is astral projection in the Bible, or are there any good guys that do that? Actually, yes. I think so. I think Elijah knew how to astrally project. There's a scripture in there that talks about how he saw something going on when he was not physically there. Uh, that is remote viewing is like a shareware version of astral projection, and he had that ability. And there's other people that the King Solomon talked about the silver cord, but then there's King Solomon. You read other things about him. I postulate that he was most likely the most powerful sorcerer that ever existed. There was a reason why he was attracted to all these different religions and pagan things. He was probably learning. He was gifted by God with divine wisdom. He had an intelligence. He was a savant off the charts, probably smarter than any other human being who's ever lived,
Mm-hmm.
and was drawn to these other religions because he learned about, oh, let's do this, let's do that. Oh, that's fascinating. Um, And then I found out years later that as I studied the Quran and the Hadiths and stuff, they talk a lot about King Solomon, which is interesting. I think Muhammad venerated Solomon more than anybody in the Old Testament, which is interesting because and King Solomon, you don't really even know how he ended up. Like he fell into idolatry later in life. Like, really? You want to venerate that guy? Yes, he was wise. Yes, he was a good king. And there's even books in the Bible written by him, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, but we don't know what happened with him. We don't know 100%. But Solomon went on to say, or Muhammad went on to say that he commanded an army of jinn. Jinn in the Quran, I did a study on jinn, cross-referencing the jinn with the Nephilim. Same thing. The jinn are not human entirely. They're hybrids. And then see, some of them were even animal angel hybrids. And the Bible talks about the root of all cryptids, or most. A lot of cryptids might just be creatures that God created that are like maybe naturally in another dimension or something like that. They could pop in and out of this one. I think that's what a Bigfoot is. I don't think they're
Mhm.
entirely here. Um, but I think the Bigfoot is, it could be there might be multiple versions too. It could be that some of these creatures were created by God, you know.
Mhm.
But then again, I think most of them, especially those imbued with supernatural abilities, um, are modern day Nephilim. They've survived to this day. The same activities going on in Genesis 6, it continued even after the flood. The flood was sent. And here's a interesting note. Everybody knows about the flood of Noah, right? Why did he bring it? To wipe out the Nephilim. Human race had been contaminated. The planet was getting destroyed because of these hybrids. They were horribly evil. They thought about evil continually only. That's what it says. Um, it was so
Mm.
bad, God had to wipe out the planet. He brought the flood to save humanity, not to destroy it. Because Noah and his
Makes
family were
sense.
the only pure strain humans that were left. It says that he was pure in his generations. The wording reflects genetics, pure in his generations. In the Hebrew, he's talking about the
Yeah.
genetics of Noah and his family. He was a
Yeah.
righteous man too, but certainly wasn't flawless. He had his mistakes too. But
Right.
God brought the flood to get rid of these Nephilim. So I'm seeing all this other version of Christianity that I had never seen before, and I was writing all these notes, and I'm like, wow, this is just blows me away. I mean, here's another one. Lucifer had a kingdom, an angelic kingdom on earth before Adam and Eve were created. You want to find out figure out the weirdness about the fossil record with the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon? That's it. Um, I talk about all that research in this book. I started my first book though was Aliens in the Bible, and I joined the Air National Guard and I went on a TDY, a business trip in layman terms. And during one weekend, I had this amassed binder just like with all these notes that I'd been taking from when I read the Bible, and I was like, I got to get this out. My brain is doing this reconciling my faith with all of this paranormal stuff, working overtime doing it.
Right.
And it operated at a subconscious level. I couldn't stop. I would dream about these things, wake up with new ideas, and I just couldn't stop. So on this first chance I got, went on this TDY, and I had a whole weekend to sit there and write because the classes I was going to um, were not going on the weekend. So your weekends you are free. So everybody else in my military unit, they're going out partying and doing whatever. I would, whenever I went on a TDY, I'd always just stay in my room and write. I'm like, hey, this is my leave me alone time. I get to write.
Woo-hoo.
And I wrote for 17 hours straight, nonstop. And
Wow.
the structure of that book just flowed. And I wrote half of the book in one weekend. That was Aliens in the Bible. And then
Wow.
over the next like month or two, I finished it. And back then they weren't doing self-publishing like they are now. You can just put something on Amazon. You don't even have to have any money. I had to pay $10,000 to publish that book. Or no, no, no.
Wow.
It was 10,000 by Vanity Press, and Ex Libris was the first company to bring that price down closer to 2,000. So I was flat
Wow.
broke, but I managed to scrounge up enough money to publish that to just get it out there, right? And I was giving it away for years, um,
Wow.
just to get the information out. And then people started connecting to me. The internet was young. That was 1996 when I first wrote a web page and started putting the research out there. And then 2000 is when I published that book. Um, and people were emailing me, and I was collecting the emails and learning more and more and more. And there were other people telling me new things, like Yeah, we call on the name of Jesus, and that usually makes the aliens go away, but not always. And we're not sure why. Sometimes they usually do, but not always. And not all of them are bad. And that was a message I kept getting hit with. Then I got a hold of a friend who, Dr. Downing, um, Jim Cunningham hooked me up with Dr. Downing, who wrote a book back in the 60s called uh, The Bible and UFOs. Uh, and
Wow.
he was ahead of his time. So his his perspective is that UFOs and aliens are divine manifestations. So it kind of goes back to the Eric von Däniken angel equal alien.
Yeah.
But he was focused on just the good guys, and he pulled out all these scriptures, Ezekiel being abducted, um, um, Elijah being abducted, 2 Kings 2:11, happened right in front of Elijah, sucked him up into this angelic chariot in a whirlwind, and off he goes, right? To heaven, bodily, physically. And yeah, those are good guys. And then the term angelic chariots, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it. Angels are not unlimited beings. They require technology because they require chariots, number one, at least some of them do. I've come now later in life to think that Star Trek is actually very accurate. I think the Q in Star Trek are like your archangels, Michael, Lucifer. They could probably teleport from one planet to another without
Mhm.
a chariot.
Mhm.
They're just really powerful. Just put themselves there, boom, they're there.
Yeah.
And that's how most people think all angels are, but they're clearly not because they have chariots. They usually show up in chariots. And, um, Ezekiel, the wheel within the wheel. I went through Ezekiel chapter 1, chapter 10. When he's flying in, he's probably like this, right? But this thing's erratic because UFOs are known to have really kind of erratic movements. He probably sees it first as wheels within wheels, and eyes are like the portals within it, right? When it's at this angle. Then when it turns like this, you see the chrysolite dome on top, which he
Yeah.
describes. You see the bottom, and it's got fire, and he says it's the bottom is made out of beryllium, which happens to be a heat resistant metal that they use in rocket nozzles to this day. That's all described in Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10. He's describing a UFO on the head, on the nose, because it's like circles with, wheels within wheels at this angle. And then he says the wings, it's got straight wings that don't flap. And there's wings on the bottom and wings on the top, and they're connected at the distant end, and they don't flap. That's a saucer. He described a saucer. So on one angle, it's like this. On another angle, it's like that. And he gives both descriptions, very, very detailed
Wow.
description in Ezekiel. And I'm like, okay, he's describing. What about the giant cylinder that floated in the sky above Israel? And then the Egyptian army was after them. And this column of fire comes out of the sky, boom, lands right there, blocks their way. Because this fire from the sky is preventing them from going. And then touches his staff on the Red Sea, and then the sea parts. That was an anti-gravity force field that was emanated there, because if it was wind, I've heard all these people like, oh no, it was this huge wind that blew, and there's a channel there, and the wind had to blow so hard. Let me just say, if the wind is blowing hard enough to move an ocean, I don't think people stand a chance of crossing there because it'll blow them off of it too. And it says too, the water they saw on both sides, a wall of water, just
A
like
wall.
they show in the movie, right? That is a
Hmm.
tractor beam. That is an anti-gravity tractor beam hit right there in the center and split it. And I think that there were angels in a column of fire at night column of cloud at day because it had cloud coverage. Maybe it could be that they just called it a cloud because it was this big thing floating in the sky. What else could it be? But it was a cylinder, and it parted the Red Sea when Moses touched his staff to it, and they crossed. And so this is where it gets crazy because people are like, well, wait a minute. The Bible says that that was God that did that. Yeah, I believe it is. But God delegates. God assigns angels to do things. Consider the war in the heavens that happened when Satan, when Lucifer sent his rebellion against God. God didn't even lift a finger on that. He sent Michael. He tapped Michael on the shoulder, said, take care of that. Come on, you know, clean this up. And Michael was the one that put it into that rebellion between Lucifer and God, right? God didn't even do anything. God's like, I'll save the big stuff for me. That's the cross. I'm not going to ask you to do that. That's hard. And Jesus came here, lived 30 years here as a human being, set aside all of his divine power and his abilities, dealt with all of our discomforts, experiencing things like going to the bathroom and getting hungry and getting sick, maybe. Everything that we experience, he experienced. It's called kenosis. He drained himself of all of his power, did not consider himself as equal with God while he was here as a human being. And that's why, if that were not so, he would not have been, it wouldn't have been possible to kill him. His experience here as a human being wouldn't have been like a normal person, but he wanted to have the full package because he's an intimate God. And he is like, you know what? I created y'all. I want to feel exactly what you're feeling. I want to experience it. That's another reason why I said I think that Jesus is the aspect of, he's the creation of God within his creation. I think the Trinity existed when creation was created, because then that's when God split himself up. And the piece of him that went in time space is Jesus and Holy Spirit, while the Father is outside time space, where no one has seen the Father except for Jesus. That's what he said, and I think that's what he means by that. We can't conceive of the Father because he's outside of time space altogether. The closest we get to seeing the Father is seeing him. But that's how that all happened. And see, God, he delegates to angels, and angels use technology, at least some of them. So this is where people get confused because they're like, oh no, angels, no, ETs created humanity, ETs this, ETs that. We got evidence. And there's a huge archive of evidence in the earth of an ancient civilization of ETs that once existed on this planet. Yeah, the Bible says it. It's in Isaiah 14. It's in Ezekiel 28. You can read it. It's just most people don't know that that's what they're reading when they're reading it. And
Yeah.
it's all there. So it's this whole other version of reality where you're reading the Bible, but it's coming out more like Star Wars or Star Trek. And that was that first book. And now it's this book. And thesis of this is to reconcile. ETs exist. They are transdimensional, but they're also extraterrestrial. I think they're both. We live in a multidimensional reality. It's populated with a variety of life of all kinds. And
Do you
that's what it's
think that
about.
do you think that we have ETs, or I shouldn't say ETs, but beings living within Earth?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I saw I think it's a real video. This guy that was a contractor that used to build underground facilities for military. He was a
Mm.
contractor. And I have that video shared on my YouTube channel. Um, and the guy's talking about this fantastical experience where as they were drilling down, they broke through into an opening that they didn't know was there. It didn't show up on their scans. And so suddenly they said, okay, cease operations. SEAL team is taken over and they're going to deploy down into this hole. And this guy was kind of tripping out and he asked around and so he had clearance and they told him there's a civilization down there and they're not good.
Wow.
They're like 7 foot tall. They told him this stuff and he was like having a hard time wrapping his head around it. And he's like, let me go down there with you. I got to see this for myself. They went down and he was in a some kind of like this thing attached to cables and whatnot, like the elevators that go down in underground facilities. And the team that was going down, they were armed to the teeth, to the hilt, and he heard a firefight going on down there as he was still descending, and then realizing the danger, you know, stopped it and then tried to get out of there and was going the other way. And he said he heard shooting, but then he also saw what he saw. That was like plasma or something. It wasn't like laser. It was like these balls of light that were like flying and stuff. And
Huh.
one of these things, these balls of energy came flying up at him, and it almost nailed him center mass. He got out of the way and it hit his hand. And he's given this lecture this whole time, and it's getting harder and harder to believe him until he lifts up his hand, and his hand was melted. Part of his hand was gone. And he's like, and it hit my hand. And that's where he ended the lecture. And everybody's like, what? And then he said a few
Wow.
more things, and eh, he said, I'm speaking about this now because this war between us here on the surface and them down there has been going on. When we find them, we try to take them out because they are not good and they have incredible technology. So yes, we're interested in them, but um, they are an infestation, and whenever we discover them, we have to fight them. Um, and then he said that it's like the highest classification of classification that there is,
Mhm.
and that he didn't expect that he would live very long because he went public with this information. And like then I read later, within 2 weeks of him giving that presentation, he was suicided in his hotel room. And that's what he said would happen. He said, "Oh, you'll find me in my hotel room and it'll make it look like a suicide, but I'll tell you right now, I don't want to commit suicide. I'm trying to get the word out about this." And but yeah, he was killed for that testimony. So that's another reason why I think that his is a genuine testimony. I also know about things in Antarctica. Um, I learned from I was a chief, a retired chief master sergeant in the Air National Guard, and I went to a chief's council and down in Ventura County here. There were chiefs from all over the United States that were there, and then there was this Q&A session where they had this one bigwig. Um, he might have been the chief of the Air Force or something like that. I don't remember who his identity was, but he was the one fielding the questions. And one guy raised his hand and he said, "When are we going to hear more about the Antarctica TDY?" And I hear Antarctica, my ears perk up. I'm like, what's the military doing in Antarctica? Um, it's supposed to be not a military zone, as a scientist and stuff, right? And the reaction of this guy in the front, he said, "Shut up, not another word." And he was like, I was just, I said, "Shut up. This is not the place for that."
Wow.
And he did not know. There were a couple people like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, now
And
everybody's intrigued.
yeah, so I know that there's a military presence in Antarctica. That's the extent of my knowledge. And it was just from that, right? And I wasn't read into any kind of a classified briefing or anything, but even just the existence of that operation was way classified beyond anybody there. And they didn't want anybody even knowing that there was anything to do with Antarctica going on anywhere. Um, Now there's this other lady, this journalist, Linda Howe, a famous journalist that talks about UFOs and stuff. I think she won a Pulitzer or something like that, and not about UFOs, about other things. But she's gone on to talk about UFOs and government cover-ups and stuff. And she's got two accounts of Navy SEAL blowing a whistle about operations that they were involved in Antarctica. One was an extraction where the guy was taking out a scientist from this location in Antarctica. And this other guy talked about going there as well. And they both described the same thing. And they didn't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
But it's apparently about 3 miles under the ice, they found an underground facility that defies our science. The It's about 40 feet high, and I think they said it totals about 9 acres of underground area that's hollowed out, 40 feet high in these ceilings in these rooms. It's several rooms that are like the size of football fields, and they don't have support beams. So you're talking about something that's 3 miles under the ice, and it's somehow holding up all of that weight without any kind of support structures. And the walls and the ceiling are made of these little things. They looked like basalt, and they had these runes and stuff engraved on them. And these little tiles were everywhere. I mean, the walls and the ceiling were made out of these tiles, and when you walked near them, they would glow. The whole place, as you walked around, the light would move around with you. So you didn't need to flip on a switch to light up the entire room. You just walked around and the light would move with you, illuminating off of these tiles. And the tiles is the technology, and they said that they believe that it was molecular, like imagine software and hardware being the same thing at a molecular level, where you got the programming built in to the molecules to do things that you want them to do. And it was generating an anti-gravity force field in order to hold up all that weight.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what we had our
Wow.
scientists there to do. That was one of the things there, is studying this material, trying to understand it, trying to reverse engineer it. Yeah.
Wow.
Uh, so that was
Wow.
her testimony. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything super fantastic like that. All I know is that there's something highly classified going on in Antarctica. And then I heard those testimonies about those Navy SEAL guys later on. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's all the same thing. And according to my research, that would be evidence of Lucifer's kingdom when he once ruled and reigned on this planet a long time ago. They became incredibly powerful, incredibly advanced, and then he got big-headed and decided to invade God's throne. Uh, he sent an armada. And of course, it's talked about in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, where said Lucifer walked in the garden of God. And this was before he sinned. So the garden of God, Garden of Eden, well, Adam and Eve aren't there yet. When we see in Genesis Satan interfacing with the snake and in Adam and Eve, he's a fallen being trying to tempt them to do something evil.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in charge of the planet. They were given dominion over the planet. So how can he be a king ruling and reigning over a kingdom when Adam and Eve are in charge? That doesn't work. He's already kicked out. He's already fallen. And the events that are in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 show a rebellion that Satan walked in the garden of God and he ascended above the clouds on earth. I mean, Eden is on earth. So his kingdom had to be on earth. It said he was on a throne. So a throne is a king. A king has a kingdom, subjects. So it was an angelic kingdom here. Some of them were immortal beings like him. They went through a metamorphosis and they became angelic beings that do not die. Others were mortal. They haven't gone through the transformation yet. They were like Adam and Eve before they ate from the apple, or ate, it wasn't an apple probably, but before they ate from the tree, they became mortal. But if they never ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then they would have continued to eat from the tree of life, probably get to be maybe 1,000 years old or whatever. And then eventually they would have reached an age of spiritual maturity and they would have translated into an angelic being. See, we're what I call an exogenic species. We were originally created to live for a long time. And then when we get mature, we translate into this immortal state of being. I think that's what angels are. that they started out reproductive, like Adam and Eve. And then they translated and became angels, and they don't reproduce anymore after that. And that's what a lot of Christians are confused about. But I'm seeing this, I'm reading the Bible with a biology mindset, you know.
Yeah.
Clearly, angels are biological. They mated with humans. They would not have been attracted to them if they didn't, right? Genesis 6 says that they were attracted to women. They wouldn't have been attracted had they not been created as a species that reproduces. But Jesus said, in the future, we'll be like the angels, which neither marry nor are they given in marriage. And since they're not fornicating and sinning, then they obviously don't have sex either, right? And so people just think that angels are these sexless beings. No, that's not true. They wouldn't have had children. They wouldn't have been able to have children. Maybe they could augment themselves. And that's what they say. Oh, well, they just like create bodies for themselves so that they could have children. No, I don't think so. I think that's their bodies because they were attracted to the women. They wanted to have children. And then they tweaked around on their DNA, and that's what they're doing now. They're abducting people. What do? Always these genetic experiments. This now they're working on Nephilim 2.0. And I think this is going in the direction of the Antichrist. I think he's going to be a Nephilim. He's going to be a genetic hybrid with the best of everything they have to offer. And it's a lot of information, I know, but that's all within in this book and in some others. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
probably just totally talked your ears off and
No, it's great. This is great. I love how you compare with the Bible and the ETs and how it all relates. It's very interesting. I have read the Bible from front to back, but I would love to read it again and look at it in more of a spiritual way this time and kind of see
yeah,
how that comes about because it is quite interesting because I've heard from multiple people their thoughts on that too is that the Bible is one of the most paranormal books out there. So
yeah.
it would be very interesting to reread it and have a
And
different
with all this
mindset.
disclosure stuff they're talking about, people as
Mhm.
prominent as JD Vance saying that they're all demons. And I'm like, well, okay, demon is the wrong word. Demons non-corporeal. Um, some of them are fallen angels. Some of them are aligned with satanic forces. The ones abducting us and doing horrific experiments probably are not good, but they're not all bad because you have good guys too. You have these prophets in the Old Testament that were interfacing with them. They were giving messages about our future. They actually literally go to God's throne. The Bible mentions God's throne with a physical location in three different places in the sides of the north. That tells me that there's this glorified planet in the cosmos, in the northern quadrant of our cosmos, where God's literal throne is. Jesus sitting on a throne on this glorified planet. Every description in the Bible describes heaven as a physical place. It's got a sky, it's got mountains, it's got the river of life, it's got trees, it's got animals, and a city, New Jerusalem, 1,500-mile square city. And that city is going to be brought here to Earth. So if that's not a physical place, how are they going to take a physical city and transport it to a physical planet? It's on a planet right now in the
Yeah.
north. And Satan led his rebellion from Earth to that planet. And Michael countered him and put an end to it. So that's why I say the Bible actually reads a lot more like Star Wars when you're starting to see all of these things like that. And I got this other book. This is called The Dark World Paradox. You could see there's a Bigfoot back here and there's this UFO over here. And it's a fictional book, but it operates with that worldview. And there's another thing that people don't consider. And a lot of people are missing the boat on so many things. That the ancient astronaut folks are missing the boat because it's like you could understand, like they Dr. Raymond Greer, he likes to say, oh, they're all good. They're all good. We're the ones that are making it look evil. We're the ones trying to create a red flag event. We're the ones reverse engineering the technology, pretending to be ETs and manufacturing fake ETs and all of this stuff, right?
Mm,
Maybe, but it's not. But according to the Bible, there's some bad ones out there too. So as much as he would like to see it's all rainbows and butterflies, I think there's bad ones too.
mhm,
And they're here on Earth. They're in a higher dimension. I talk about that. Earth is multi-layered in dimensions. And
mhm,
in first heaven, Earth is a much larger planet, and there's a civilization up there, extremely powerful, extremely advanced, and Satan is in charge of it. Uh, a big chunk of it. Not entirely, though. I think the Archangel Michael is here. You read about him in Daniel 12. I think we have good guys keeping Satan in check. He can't completely come in and take over because there's good guys that are preventing him. There's a dynamic here. So when the ancient astronaut guys and Raymond Greer say, if they were evil, they would have just destroyed us. No, no, because there are good guys that are keeping them from just destroying us. And besides, Satan doesn't want to just destroy us. He wants to deceive us. He doesn't want to destroy our bodies. He wants to destroy our souls. He is
mhm,
vindictive. It's not enough to just blow us up. He wants to deceive us into rejecting God, then blow us up. That's his plan. And he can't deceive us unless he's got some huge orchestrated plan to pull that off. And that's what I think we're headed for in the future.
I think that's a good spot to end at. But yeah, that's so fascinating what you talk about in all different ways. And, again, with the biblical side of it, it's
Hmm.
so amazing to me. It's really intriguing for me to see that, as I'm Lutheran.
Hmm.
And so I look at that different side, and it is really, people don't look at it that way.
Yeah, they don't. And if you want a shortcut, I think I emailed this to you. You can look at the end, and I have an appendix in there, and it's like the cliff notes of the research. This is like referencing 750 scriptures to support my evidence. A supportive evidence to say, hey, here's what this is, here's what this means, here's the Hebrew, here's the Greek, here's the Aramaic, um, and on and on. And it's I got a pretty fat uh, research appendix, notes that were used to do this research, in addition to just a lot of scriptures pointing at this, pointing in that, connecting the dots. Sheep of another fold, cosmic salvation, things that Christians generally don't think about, but then ancient astronaut people don't take into consideration either. That the Bible actually could give them a lot more information if they would just look at it for what it says instead of trying to just push it out of the way because it doesn't fit their agenda exactly. Um, Now, I could be accused of that too, but I already read the back of the book. Jesus said his name to me. I know he's real. I don't need to try to prove it. Um, so for me, I'm like, I think ETs are real too. I know Jesus is real. And the Bible, I'm still trying to understand it. I still don't claim to understand it all, I'm still trying to read it and research it and understand it. But what I do understand and what I do see that lines up with these other things here, that's where I'm connecting these dots. And that's where I think, a lot of Christians might be interested in this. And it turns out that there are more and more Christians are coming out. When I first wrote this stuff, back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, it was like radical. I caught a lot of flack from a lot of people, prominent people, Gary Bates, just publicly ridicule me and no, you're wrong. His doctrines of demons and blah blah blah. And I'm like, really? I mean, you got this whole special vocabulary set aside for people who say interesting things that don't quite fit in your box, heretic, you blasphemer, doctrines of demons, and on and on. It's like, can't you just criticize somebody with some normal vocabulary? I don't think I'm sending people to hell, I'm just asking you to think, read what you're reading and then think. And hey, if I'm wrong, if I'm showing people off into this other area that is like, you think they're gonna be deceived and go to hell, please let me know and try to prove me, try to prove it to me where I'm off base because I have changed my views on some things. I used to be young Earth theory. Now I'm old Earth. You know, um, I think the Earth is million or billions of years old, um, but I don't believe in evolution. I don't think evolution is correct. I've seen too much of what comes out of that doctrine. Hitler based his whole Aryan nation and the master race on evolution. I mean, that's just one example. Um, but variation within a species, yes, I do believe that. We can demonstrate that. You can't really demonstrate that human beings just popped out of thin air. Um, just add a couple million years to it, and then, you know, well, that goes against physics. Uh, and physics is thermodynamic, second law of thermodynamics. Things go from a state of order to a state of chaos. They don't start as chaos and then become exponentially complex as a human being. You don't go from no life to life by zapping a cluster of randomly assimilated amino acids with a bolt of lightning. Uh, these are some of the theories that they come up with, about how life came about. And I'm like, well, why not believe what the Bible says? God created us, right? And I had been there and done that. I had gone through all these different versions of how maybe evolution is how God did what he did and how God created and stuff. But I've become further and further from that. Um, and then the more you study the fossil record and stuff, they come up with things like punctuated equilibrium to explain how the fossil record went through these dramatic changes in a short period of time. Like, go figure, what would the fossil record look like if you showed up and just created a life form? Dramatic changes, in a short period of time. I don't think a lot of time would add more order to creation. I think it would create more chaos. Um, so there's a lot of science to it that I put in it. I'm a bit of an academic. I was in school while I was writing it. I got 5 degrees, two associates, a bachelor, and two master degrees. And I put that intellect and research into writing to come up with these theories. And I'll call them theories just because I'm not going to be dogmatic, and a lot of what I write, I wouldn't consider as something that would be worth breaking away from your faith over. I just think that there's certain things that are interesting. They're worthy of exploration, and there's things to learn there. And people should be able to have civil debates about it. And if we disagree, okay, we could be civil. We could disagree civilly, but um, and then for any Christians who see this that think, okay, what kind of Christian is this guy? I get all the New Age stuff. I've heard all that, but exactly what does he even believe in the Trinity? Does he believe that Jesus is immaculately conceived, that he died on the cross, and raised again? And I believe all that. The evangelical statement of faith. So for people who wonder what I actually believe as a Christian, I put my faith statement of faith on my website, and it's all pretty, standard conservative Christian stuff that they would think, and this guy believes in aliens? He
Yeah.
seems like a normal Christian.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm an open-minded Christian, and willing to dialogue and research all kinds of different things and not necessarily just put the demonic label on it. Uh,
Mhm.
but that's not to say that demons don't exist because I've literally seen them before, so I know they exist. But there's not a demon around every corner, and I don't want to
Right.
give Satan any more credit than what he already has.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And So much information. Oh my goodness.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
it's so
Thank you
much.
for
Yeah,
having me on. You have a good one.
absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime. Yeah, yeah, thank you for everything. It's so much fun. So much
Okay.
fun. So interesting. So, um, thank you. And
All
we
right.
will talk with you later. And if anyone else out there has a story you would like to share, email me paranormaldana726 at gmail.com. And we will talk with everyone next time.